Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Review Show, hosted by Friends Professor, and hopefully you won't be too distracted by Toby back there on the couch. So this is next in my series, the fourth in a series, of albums of the year that I might have missed. I last reviewed Kyra Jackson, and then before that, Model Actrice and Jeff Rosenstock. And interestingly enough, both Rosenstock and Model Actrice got 24% of the vote, and also getting 24% of the vote is the subject of today's review analysis, Slauson Malone. And definitely, I understand why people have been filling my inboxes and my DMs and all that with Skye, when are you going to get to Slauson Malone? It's one of those rare albums that actually lives up to its Bandcamp spiel. And so if you ever go on Bandcamp, they sort of have artist statements, right? And this is what it says there. Exploring the possible intersections of popular music and performance art. And that's what this is. This is exactly that. It is a totally successful merge of popular music and performance art. I would say it's a little bit more on the artistic side, a little bit less on the popular side, but it exists in a way almost as like it's state of art. Not state of the art, meaning super advanced, but like it's the state of art. If we were to think about artistic music and the expressions that are made through popular music and more abstract music, we're in this genreless world where things seem to go between chaotic and meditative. We have all these themes of alienation, themes of fear, and it all comes together on this really wonderful album, which definitely is understandably in the running for Album of the Year. But what took me so long? Why didn't I review this album earlier? Well, there's a bunch of dumb reasons. I'm going to go over those reasons right now. The first one was the name. Now, when I hear the name Slauson, the first thing I think of, you might think, oh, Nipsey Hussle. No, I'm much more old school than that. I think of this album. I did an entire review of this one album, King T, Act a Fool. I think it is the best West Coast rap album of the 80s. You can fight me on that. And there's a whole thing on here, a whole little skit called Bagging on Moms, where they make fun of someone saying, your mom's so tall, she bump her head on Crenshaw, and she fall on Slauson. It's just, street names in Compton. So I always think of King T. And then I saw that the last name was Malone. So I was sort of like, I'd never listened, right? I just saw the name Slauson Malone. And I noticed that all of the comments were on my sort of more avant-garde rap videos. So in my mind, this was somebody who was not really, from Slauson, not someone who was a member of any gang or living that gang lifestyle or living up surrounded by gangsters, but sort of maybe commenting on it. Maybe the name was ironic. And then I thought about Malone and I thought about Post Malone. And I realized, well, Post Malone got his name from the Wu-Tang name generator, which is the same one that Childish Gambino got his name from. So it just sort of had this whole I was just fearing it was going to be kind of a half-assed, snooty, or what if hip-hop? Or what if I do hip-hop? But then that wasn't it at all. I mean, that might have been where the name came from. But he's not related to Post Malone. He is not Post Malone's brother, Post Malone's nephew. He is part of a huge Nepo baby family. Now, I am saying Nepo baby in a very tongue-in-cheek way. Because when we're talking about jazz musicians, we're not exactly talking about the Bezoses and the and the Rockefellers, right? When I'm talking about Nepo babies, I am talking about the Marsalis jazz family. And this is the other reason that I wasn't really drawn to this album. Once I realized this guy was a Marsalis, on some level I was taken back to Belmont, Massachusetts in 1988 in my friend Jonathan's room. He later acquired the nickname Stumpy. So I'm there in Stumpy's room, and his father was really into jazz. And he, wasn't into jazz. He was my friend Jonathan, he did a thing where he literally bought the album Dr. Feelgood by Motley Crue just to memorize all the lyrics so he could walk down the hall in middle school and sing the lyrics. Hilariously, the first time he did this, some kid turned around, probably someone like Saka or Fitzy, said to him, "Oh my God, that album's so old." So I never took him seriously because he always wanted to be popular and his taste in music was like always bad. So I remember exactly where I was when he was explaining to me that Branford and Wynton Marsalis, that Branford was Wynton Marsalis' son, which is not true. It turns out he's his brother, but he was 12 years old, right? And so I just remember being forced to listen to this kind of jazz music and associating it with like Motley Crue and bad taste. As time would go on, of course, I would learn that the Marsalis brothers make great music. They would even play with the Grateful Dead. I have some bootlegs back there, bootleg tapes, where I think it's Wynton who played with the Grateful Dead. But still, it's a fascinating idea that there's the grandfather who was a jazz, I believe, pianist, and then two great jazz horn players, and then now Jasper Marsalis with this project. True story, this was almost Professor Jasper's record review. That was my original name. When I was born, I didn't have a name. They just called me Baby for like a month. And then they were going to call me Jasper. But my godmother, who's a little old British lady, said, you don't want him to be called a little ghost. So one of their weird hippie hanger-ons suggested Skye. So that's one thing, right? So already that's interesting. And maybe you don't know that because if you haven't grown up, most of my viewers here are on the younger side. You don't remember there was a time where there were, I'm not going to say household names, but the Marsalis brothers were as close as you can get to being a household name in jazz after the 1960s. Feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case. Now, the other interesting thing about this album is that it's very clearly made by somebody who has benefited from their privilege. And that is not a criticism. Privilege is not actually an insult. It's lucky, but that's it. This is somebody who, I would presume, based on his father's great success and his family's great success, has been free to think about bigger ideas. It isn't thinking hand to mouth. Isn't thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do for my next paycheck? Am I going to be okay? That gives him the space to venture into, and I'm saying him even though I'm realizing I did not check pronouns, and there are some interesting themes of gender on here. So in the event that his pronouns are not him, please know that I will pin that in the comments, okay? As far as I know, it's him, but that's as far as I know. But he took that privilege and made really interesting art. He could have, I'm sure, just decided to play the saxophone and have a career for the rest of his life as, Branford's nephew and Wynton's son. Instead, he makes this album, which definitely is definitely steeped in popular music, but it's also kind of steeped in new music, in art music. I live in Rochester, New York, and one of the cool things you can do when you live here is they have like new music free concerts. Now, when I say new music, I don't mean like what I review here. I mean like really far out, very experimental stuff. I once went with my ex-girlfriend. She had a doctorate in music, and so she took me, and it was the kind of thing where 30 people on stage and just completely quiet for like 3 minutes, and someone like plays the inside of a piano with a cinder block, and then someone like farts into a flugelhorn, and it's a very advanced, not very accessible style of music. And I'm making fun of it here, but it was very impressive. It was very interesting, and one of the things that you're constantly told is that that's some of the hardest music to play. They're playing all that. It might actually be easier than sitting there for 3 minutes and hitting the exact right. So all of this kind of comes together with this album, where we have Jasper Marsalis, like a true prince of music, right? with a grandfather, a father, and an uncle as kings of music. And you think I'm joking? You talk to some jazz guy about the Marsalis. I mean, they might say they're a little bit mainstream, but still. And what does he do? Oh, not much. Just plays synthesizer, does most of the voice work, plays some trumpet, plays some guitar, plays some bass, does drum programming. He very clearly has taken in all of this, all these influences, all this access, all of this to create this beautiful album. The title of which is Excelsior. I don't think that's a reference to Stan Lee's catchphrase, but Stan Lee of Marvel would say Excelsior. Nor do I think it's a reference to the state motto of New York State, which is Excelsior. I think it's just sort of meaning reaching the top. The album cover itself is this sort of like gray mass with little color bars in the bottom. It has a very intentionally artistic feel. like not afraid to alienate. But because the album is so consistently mixed in with pop music, it's never disagreeable. It never actually gets to the point where you get the sense that he's sitting there like, hey, your record collection's very meat and potatoes. Oh, thank you. No, by that I mean there's nothing rare. Like, there's no sense that he's looking down at you, trying to see if you can guess, Tiny Poop Squiggly, right? He is just riding the line perfectly between unlistenably avant-garde and overly easy pop music. Part of the way he does this is the album's very modular. Like, sometimes when I listen to it for the first time, like, there's just, I was like, wait, that was a different song? I didn't, I take notes. I write down the names of every song, and then I take notes underneath as I listen. And I, like, missed a couple songs because it just goes in. Sometimes one song will have, like, 4 different songs in it. Other times, 2 songs will sound like one song. But it's really just this effort to mix these things together. It goes in between genres. Again, it flirts with being a little too clever. Like when it gets into a song that's one of my favorite songs of the album, but that's kind of like based on reggae dub, it's a little bit like, all right. But in reality, what I find fascinating about this album is how long it took me to get into it. So I'm going to give you my stamp, my example song off the album. Before I do, if you're enjoying this video, if you want to give Stumpy some props, smash the like button, subscribe. Please leave a comment. If you just want to help me, but you don't want to say anything, you can just put in the letters AVAA. That stands for awesome video as always, and I always give those a heart 100% of the time. Okay, you can also say ATAA for awesome Toby as always, because Toby's still back there and he's sleeping. So my stamp, it was 30. I was listening to this album, and I was listening to it at the gym, as I do usually the first time I listen to an album, and I liked it. But I was like, am I really going to review this? Do I have enough to say? I mean, this is interesting, and I can tell the Stumpy story, and that's kind of amusing, and all that. But then 31 minutes into the album, and I am just like, in. Like, all of a sudden, it's like sometimes, if you eat a good meal that's a little bit challenging, there's some tastes, and you don't quite know. Like the first time you have like sag paneer or something, I think it's good. The sauce is a little strong. But then like maybe 10 bites in, you're like, this is my life now. I have to eat this every day. I must listen to Slauson Malone 1. I'm sorry, his full name is Slauson Malone 1. I must listen to Slauson Malone 1 just always. And it came with the song, I Hear a New World. Now, quickly, the song right before it has this drum roll that makes it sound like a circus and a very Frank Zappa-esque freakout. Speaking of somebody who knew how to mix together avant-garde art music and pop music, I'm going to be doing a Zappa video eventually on one of his 60s albums because he's just too fascinating. But, just a real freak out and just this line, I hear a new world. And there's so much, like, quiet. There was a pause in the song, and I thought, oh, I must have, and I was at the gym, so I must have, like, just exercised too hard and accidentally paused it or something, or just something. And then I look at and then I hit play again, but then I actually paused it. So it was like a whole minute where I'm not hearing any music. It's built in there. Again, it's that chaos and quiet, which now that I really, I spend a lot of time thinking about music right now, right? I think I spend a lot of time thinking about what the goddamn hell is our zeitgeist, because it's clearly in the music, it's clearly in the culture, so how do we distill it? How do we extract it? Like dino DNA from a mosquito, the way you extract it is you just take a larger view, and it really feels like this combination of chaos and meditation is everything, because we live in this very chaotic information world, and we have to constantly figure out a way to be calm. It's those things together. But what was it that drew me into this song? It's this gorgeous, haunted waltz. I hear a new world. And then the voice doubles. I hear a new world. And then it triples. I hear a new world. It just gets weirder and weirder. But there's something about it that doesn't feel like it's trying to be weird. It just is trying to be alien, haunting me, so strange and surreal. It is almost horror. There's so much like borderline horror music sounds on this album. I'm going to be talking about The Shining a couple times on this album, on this review, and I get those feelings. It also reminds me strongly of an album I listened to recently, the Popeye soundtrack. If 100 Gex made the Popeye soundtrack with Harry Nilsson, this is how it would sound. And that, if you understand all those references, is worth a thumbs up. If not, it's worth looking into the Harry Nilsson soundtrack. Now, I did look at Lyric Genius, just to read some quotes, sort of see what it said. There's not that much there, which is weird, because y'all really want me to review this album. And in general, I trust my auditors. You trust me to show you cool stuff. I trust you to tell me about cool stuff. I check out almost everything that you recommend to me. Not everything, because you recommend a lot, but almost everything. And certainly if something gets recommended this many times. Anyways, I was thinking a lot about space operas. Alien, H.G. Geiger is a huge influence. And that really helped things kind of snap into focus, because H.G. Geiger also, this does feel like H.G. Geiger. Because H.G. Geiger, if you don't know, he's the guy who developed the Alien for the movie Aliens. His art is this weird, semi-biological, horrific, slimy, dark, psychosexual. Basically, if you could imagine an alien that was made out of penises, vaginas, faces, and beetle shells, if you just put all those things into one thing, that is the artistic expression of H.G. Geiger. And it makes sense with this album. Brief aside, I'm not sponsored, right? So I'm not technically sponsored by the Switzerland Tourism Bureau. But one of the greatest places on earth to visit is a place called Gruyere. Gruyere, Gruyere. One, because that's where Gruyere cheese is from, and you can go and visit the caves and eat some great Gruyere cheese. And then you can climb up this hill and go into an old castle city. And inside that castle city is the H.G. Geiger Museum. And next to the H.G. Geiger Museum is a bar that's designed like an H.G. Geiger world. And I went there and I drank absinthe. I don't drink much, but I figured I'd better drink absinthe in the H.G. Geiger bar. Anyways, that's... if you're asking me hey, Skye, where should I go? Go there. It's an amazing experience. So... Jasper, little ghost, talks about how it's maybe an arrival at a new planet and a sense of optimistic fervor and joy and discovery, but also impending doom. So it's interesting because I get a huge global warming feel off this album. You young people, and I don't even know how old he is. He might be older than me. I doubt he is. But in general, people who make music these days are really worried about global warming just because it's happening and we're all going to die. Alarmist much, but no, this is really more about that feeling, and it becomes almost like a little soundtrack. Doom, joy, discovery, it's all here. But the reason that it just became clear to me 31 minutes in, all these layers, all these sounds, this little clavichord or little harpsichord sound, and these double voices, and there's so many little tiny production choices, little tiny things, instances that happen just once. It is just an amazing piece of art. And it's also catchy, because right now I can sing you the song. Okay, I'm going to go through the rest of the album a lot quicker now. Starting off with the track The Weather. Warbledness is a big part of this album. Warbled guitars, warbled tapes. This has a warbled tape that comes in with these orchestral sounds, gets cut off abruptly. The voice is very cool. This question that opens up the album, where I go, bring me home. There's a real theme of what is home, where do I go? There's a sense of alienation, of loneliness, of sort of like being like a spaceman or spacewoman or a space envy, flying out with your little keyboard and just kind of flying out there. That's how this album often feels to me. Spoiler, I'm going to be bringing up that album later. Nice little couplets of words that are kind of dark and foreboding. There's a lot of Radiohead in here, at least that I hear. Digging holes, mining souls, sludge to smoke, buried bone, extraction coal, takes its toll, Texaco, melts the cold. The ominous global warming. But I love how everything in this album feels like it's constantly either just about to form, or once it's formed, it feels like it's just about to fall apart. Roman roads mislead me home. So that's a play on country roads and Roman roads, meaning imperial... Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. Okay. Roman roads mislead me home. So this is obviously a play on the song Country Roads, which I talked about at length about the cover with Lana Del Rey. True story, my daughter had a birthday party yesterday down in the basement, down in the funk basement where all of our instruments and PA is. They sang a very good version of Country Roads. But Roman roads. What did Rome do? Rome subjugated the entire world. Rome took over people and made them pay taxes and forced them into servitude. But, as the Life of Brian will tell you, also, they gave roads and public health and wine and public services. So Roman roads are a great indicator, a great representative of colonial power, both good and bad. Mislead me home, and in parentheses, 400 blows. Sometimes y'all care about what I think. Sometimes y'all want recommendations from me. If you have not seen the movie 400 Blows by Francois Truffaut, stop your life and watch it. It is this charming, beautiful little story about a troubled French kid who's just living his life. I don't know. I think it was made in 58. I think it was made in 1958. It doesn't matter. It feels so real. It feels so new. It's the beginning of the French New Wave. Quatre cents coups is actually an expression which means like hard knock life, which was bizarrely translated directly into English for 400 blows. It's one of the worst translations in world cinema history. If you go to college, you probably have a service called Canopy through your library. You can probably watch this movie for free. Okay. But it's a beautiful image, all these things here. Roman roads, we have the imperial influence, and we have Mislead Me Home, which is like a pop culture reference to the John Denver song, which John Denver didn't write, but go anyways. And then this reference to this movie and this character who's had kind of a hard life trying to find his way and trying to find a home. All that's just in that one little line. Is that why you wanted me to review it? Because you knew I'd say something like that? It's cool. Not only do I have Toby behind me, but I have like this squirrel on my willow tree out there who's just, he's really distracting because he's running back and forth. Now he's scratching his neck. Anyways, smash the like bucket again if you like squirrels as much as I do. Next track is called House Music. It's not house music. When did it become this? I don't know. I don't know when this song started because it went just from the last song. Except here, this is that thing where it's like, what if I did a little bit of pop, like trap sounding drums? Wouldn't that be cute? Not really. It's not going to form into a trap song. It's too stuttered, and these great blown out sounds, and just the way the vocals are produced on this album is so beautiful. And again, this is the way art is right now. Manipulated vocals because of technological advancements in computers, and also with our general questioning of the value of the lead singer, protagonist, hero in all music has made it, and also I would argue that a lot of our questions about gender and identity all led into basically, it's rare to hear many singers sing without their voice being manipulated, crunched, cut up, pitched up, or whatever. Now, even if they're not trying to make it sound that way, then we might have auto-tune as well. Like the human voice, oh my God, am I going to make some super pretentious point? I am. Here I go. The human voice is now officially more electronic than human. Wow, Skye, you're so deep. What? You should get a deal writing for Black Mirror. But it's true. It's true. Most voices that you hear in pop music that you hear on the radio are being altered by computers to be pitch corrected. And then most of the underground music that you hear intentionally manipulates the voice and cuts it up just like Slauson Malone does, to the point where that one thing that we had that couldn't be taken away from us, even acoustic guitars or electric guitars, those are still tools that are made by us. Those are just tools. An acoustic guitar is a tool the same way that a Macintosh computer is a tool, the Pro Tools is a tool. The only thing that we have that's not a tool is going like this and singing in our voice. And we have officially sacrificed that to the computer artistically and commercially. And so there's some auto-tune in here as well, as if to underline that point. Piss. Sings about piss. It's weird. It's gross. Don't quite get it. Sings a fair amount about kind of gross stuff that's matched by the music, and then it gets sweet. And this is the thing, Slauson Malone is a great guitar player. He's able to play this really sweet soul-like guitar and like doubled messed up voice, all these weird noises, sings about his cousins, and the way he pronounces New Orleans is like the least New Orleans way of pronouncing it. He's like, New Orleans, as opposed to, Nolans. That's where the Marceles family is from. I believe he lives in LA now, but still, that's where they're from. That's their sort of cultural hub. That's where jazz is from. Basically, if you like any music, it's because of a bunch of slaves in New Orleans having Sunday off, making music together. So, New Orleans is very important. An important reference here. Then it might be about global warming, this whole thing, hard to tell, because, saying change is coming, and Nolans is one of those places that's going to be heavily affected because of the water. I mean, obviously Katrina, but what's coming is worse than Katrina. It's just that it's coming a lot slower. Kind of snap and ominous noises. Next track is Undercommons, an instrumental. Guitar and synthesizers leads into Oldie Joy, O-L-D-E Joy. Curling sounds. And this is where, he's sort of, he kind of raps at times, but I wouldn't call it rapping. It's more like talking. Music reminds me strongly of, not the album, but the song Kid A by Radiohead. But then there's, I think an oboe in the back. I should look that up. I've got Lyric Genius back here, so this is going to shake the camera a little bit. But I got to see, what is that instrument? I'm going to go down to the credits here. What is that instrument on Old Joy? Because I think it's an oboe, but it might be a clarinet, and I am just too ignorant to know the difference between those. Where are the credits here? Let's see. Wurlitzer organ, whirly tube, upright piano, synths, triangle, guitar, drum programmer, bass. That's all by Slauson Malone. So I'm not seeing it. So maybe it's the whirly tube that I hear. It's beautiful. Next track is New Joy, which is this is the part that you can listen to. A nice rising voice, an odd guitar. It's kind of rough. It's like an actual drum beat. So this morning I alternate between making Kenji Lopez's pancakes. He has a great pancake recipe. And I make Dutch babies. So I made Dutch babies today, which is very good breakfast food. Never had it. I highly suggest it. And I put on my apron, and then I give my 1-year-old baby a whisk. And I just cook, and she pretends to mix with me, and that's great. And we're listening to this album, and she's just kind of hanging out. She's fine listening to it. But when this song comes in, the actual drum beat comes in, she's sitting there in her high chair, and it's like, So that's the kind of song this is. I don't know if Steve Lacy is the guy who came up with this kind of guitar, this kind of woozy, trembly, clean but dirty guitar style. But this reminds me strongly of Steve Lacy. I don't know. 80s synthesizers, high singing, Inside the Brain, Baby, Be My Bride Forever, this weird cool pre-chorus. And there's a little interstitial moment with actual funk drums, real funk drums. And then your old pal Grover. The thing about this is you listen to the little funk drum bit, and I think it's a real drum machine that's playing here. But then he throws on just a tss, which is this kind of drum machine hi-hat sound. Tss. It's that kind of detail that just makes you go, Hercules, Hercules. It is such a great little detail on here. Next track is called, as we call it in Boston, Arms Armor. Very much the theme of that album. That warbled guitar is sort of the, I would say, defining sound of this album. Some nice high singing. Next track is Fission for drums, piano, and violin. This goes back to that thing I was talking about the Eastman School of Music and how you can go see new music. I mean, that's what that's the kind. That's when you walk in and you get the program. It's all fission for drums and violin, right? It's all regret as played by pencils on paper. What am I going to be seeing? What's going to happen? All right. So When I heard it, I thought this is either Portuguese or Welsh because the singing is the voice is very. It turns out it's Welsh. Apparently, saying despite everything, we're still here, and it has all those kinds of clangs, that sound of new music. It reminds me strongly of Polymorphia by Krzysztof Penderecki, which is the main conductor used for The Shining. You know, all the weird noises, the crazy ass noises in The Shining is all taken from a Polish producer, which is the genius of the editing of that movie. They didn't even, the poor MFing editor had to figure out how to mix this existing music to all this work. And it's just beautiful. The next track is Love Letter. Oh, 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 you think it's always cheesy? I sometimes think that. Anytime, because listen, I used to make music, right? I had a little 4-track recorder. I'd make music in LA down at Vicious Reasoning Studios, Rex and Zoom, baby. So like that's what I would do. And when you're mixing together, sometimes you have the little knobs and you want to play little knobs. You want to go left to right, right to left, left to right, right to left. You just want to do that because it sounds cool. It never sounds cool. Don't do it. You sound like a kid left alone in a car that's just playing with the knob, like Milhouse in The Simpsons, playing the different sounds on the radio. That's what you sound like. It's done well because it's got this cello sound with one note in the left, lower note, and then a higher note in the right. And it makes your whole brain, it makes your head in between the sounds. It feels like you're the way station in between these two sounds. This whispering of a neon campfire, actual horns at the end, high scratching. And we get to Half-Life. A lot of themes of radioactivity in this album as well. The beep of a film strip starts it off. Clear, great guitar line. And then like another left to right thing with a string quartet. And then it breaks into a completely unexpected, full, chugging rock song. The first thing, I've not always been a French teacher. When I was in high school, I barely spoke French. I was a terrible student. But I was a drummer. And I would teach my friends how to play drums the same way I learned. And the way that I learned is by learning this drum beat from this song. Okay, I set you up, give you 2 hands. On the hi-hat, you play 1, 2, 3, 4. On the bass, you play on the 1 and 3. And then on the snare, you play 2 and 4. You do that, you can play with anybody forever. That's the only drum beat you really need to know. It's that drum beat. It's that simple, great drum beat. But an album that's so filled with such ornate quietness and chaos, it's beautiful. Growling lyrics, little guitar ditty in the middle. It breaks down and reforms. It's the most together song, but that doesn't make it the best. The Great Wedge is that song that's just like a circus drum roll. It leads up to Stamp, I Hear a Whole New World, that he said was based on H.G. Geiger. And the next song is called No! Parentheses, Geiger dub. But it's not that Geiger. H.G. Geiger spelled G-I-G-E-R. This is spelled G-E-I-G-E-R, which means that it's tied into the Geiger counter, which counts radioactivity, which ties into the Half-Life song, which ties into the theme of reactivity, which ties into the theme of human creation and environmental destruction. This is bass-led, and it is based on dub. And I'm going to give you a couple recommendations. In case you've ever thought like, hey, I like reggae, but I don't know where to start. This is how I started. This, at times, reminds me very positively of the Congos. If you don't know the Congos, I just, listen, I know there's other YouTube channels. There's other music YouTube channels that are better than mine, okay? Todd in the Shadows is a better channel than mine. But he will never tell you to go to Gruyere. And I don't think he's going to put you on to the Congos either, okay? Oh, once you start listening to the Congos, your life will be full. Okay, this has that kind of sound. But what's cool is it has kind of a 70s dub sound. And then there's this low 80s Casio bass sound, which reminds me strongly of this compilation that I got a long time ago, Mash Up the Place by Rhino Records, which is like all 80s sound. This I can't find on streaming. This is a great... The example song I would say is My Weapon by Ninja Man. So look up Ninja Man, My Weapon, My Weapon. It has that kind of sound. And so it's kind of like like genre hopping, but it's beautiful. A little high synth solo. There's a little Casio. That's the thing that makes 80s dancehall so freaking cool, is how rinky dink and Casio, like I went down to Radio Shack and just bought a little keyboard and that's what I'm playing, how they can make that sound so good. It almost gets even kind of ska at a certain point, and then it falls apart. And it's funny because I was listening to that this morning, and Toby back there was whining for breakfast, because that's what he does. The second he's awake, he just whines. And the end of the song I thought was Toby whining, but it was actually, Next track is Destroyer X, full-on Radiohead piano, becomes jazzy piano, leads into Voyager, which is, again, kind of tying us in to this kind of image I have of this being like Slauson Malone here. Like, you hear these beeps. It almost sounds like just the boops and beeps of space just being lost. Simple melody, loud and then quiet. Leave me be, need a peace, mind at ease, so I sleep, bring me dreams. But then also, it gets very LA, talking about driving down the 405. I lived in LA for like a year, and within like a month of living in LA, your brain is cars. It doesn't make sense to you. If you don't live in LA, that doesn't make sense. If you lived in LA, and I say the sentence, your brain is cars, you go, yeah, that makes sense. Great start and stop. There's this great part where there's like a drum roll, and then it stops, and then hi-hat on the eighth notes. It's just beautiful. It cuts off weirdly. Next track is called Divider. I'm super excited about this because I think I have some good points. Okay. I think Divider is about trans rights and about trans musicians. Okay? It's not... Okay. If you know the album, you're like, wow, Skye, how'd you figure that out? He only quotes Arca in the first two tracks. Okay, so he does. He says, rip the slit in the beginning. It says XXXY, referring to the different chromosomes. Later on in the song, he says, pink and blue, we don't have to choose. So it's clear that it's about gender nonconformity, or about the false dichotomy of gender. And even later, he uses the word kick, which I think is in reference to Arca as well, one of the great trans artists. But there's another element. You know how I've been talking about The Shining? You know how I've been showing you this? Well, this. Did you fucking know that electronic music was mainstreamed by a trans artist? How is that not the most known thing? Maybe you do, in which case, congratulations to you. But this is Wendy Carlos, okay? Now, their music was originally produced with their dead name. This album was released in 1973. She had been living as a woman since 1968. But it wasn't until, as far as I know, she was billed as the writer of the theme to The Shining in 1979 that her real name, Wendy, was used. I am doing such a service to you. Because first I gave you the Congos. Now I'm giving you Wendy Carlos. Now listen, Wendy Carlos switched on Bach. Okay, in 1968, behind me you see Switched on Bach #1. She took Bach's music and mixed it with Moog synthesizers. I don't know which way it's pronounced because there's a hockey player named Andy Moog or Andy Moog. I forget which one is the hockey player and which one is the synthesizer. The first synthesizers, okay? She figured out how to take Bach and turned it into that kind of music, and it created this crazy effect. And Kubrick heard it, and Kubrick took her and used her for Clockwork Orange first. That crazy, weird, sound, that comes from Wendy Carlos. That is a trans artist who figured that out. This whole Bach thing has this whole long article where Moog himself discusses meeting her for the first time. And I don't know. But just please can we note that it's called Trans Electronic Music Productions. That's what she called her music back then, even when she went by her own dead name. That kind of synthesizer sound is the sound that Slauson Malone is using here, thereby connecting Arca and Wendy Carlos. Isn't that the coolest thing you've heard all day? Isn't it? And this is the I've been obsessed, right? Because I'm trying to figure out on this channel, is there such a thing as trans music? Does it exist? Is it just trans people who make music, or is there something to be said about the fact that in particular music made by trans women shares a lot of hallmarks with manipulation of voices, with a certain phoneticness, with a certain alien sound, a certain amount of chaos? And then I realize that Gexy sound, that Arca sound, that Sophie sound is also that Wendy Carlos sound. So anyways, I wasn't even planning on using this cover. I was looking for that album earlier, and I stepped into a pile of Toby's piss, because Toby does not like waiting to go out. So I just grabbed this one, and then I found that one later. I wasn't even anticipating this, but now this is my image of the album. Isn't it great? Isn't Slauson Malone releasing a really great album? Now, I don't know if he is trans, right? I don't know. Right? I don't know. Or non-binary, or AFAB, or AMAB, or any of that stuff. But I will say that this is a great track that creates this sense of history and connection. Next track is called Challenger. I don't know if that's in reference to the Challenger explosion, which happened in 1986, when your dear host was brought into a cafeteria to sit down and watch a very small CRT TV in the middle of the school day to watch Christy McAuliffe die in a giant explosion. Very traumatic, unpleasant day. I don't know if that's kind of tying into the space theme, because Voyager, the previous track, not the previous track, but a track 2 tracks ago, Voyager is also the name of this satellite that we sent out that has an album that contains all the great music of art. It's still flying out there, flying out to that. If we ever learn about other alien species, it might be because of the Voyager spacecraft, right? Which should later be discovered by Captain Kirk. Spoiler for a really bad science fiction movie. I'm not going to tell you which Star Trek I'm spoiling, but I'm spoiling one of them. Yeah, but it's a beautiful track. It seems to end with what is maybe some black political consciousness. I don't know. Dreams of the new world, but haunted by the old one. Where are we going to run when that's the slaves' cause? Running is the only way that slaves could get out of their situation. I don't know. Next track is called Decades Castle Romeo. More cello. So much beautiful cello on this album. It starts simple and then it ends quite discordant. This is that modern alienation that he's working on. Build a wall around me out of steel and concrete. Later he references phallic designs stretched through erected skies, distilled, a still stolen, purified. I like this image because I have a friend who works at the New Yorker, and I went to the New Yorker's the New Yorker offices, which is actually in the World Trade Center, the new one. I don't think I'd work there, but whatever. So he's there, and we look out over the New York skyline, and there's this new skyscraper right in the middle of Midtown that just sits up out of nowhere. And he said one of the writers there, New Yorker, some of the best writers in the world, calls that the oligarch's erection. That's what he calls that building. And that is how it feels when you see those big buildings in the middle of New York. And this is a bedroom symphony. I know it's not a bedroom. I imagine he's recording in great studios, because all he has to do is call someone and say, hi, I am Jasper Marceles. Yeah, that Marceles. I need a recording studio. And the world opens up for him. But it's beautiful. A little string quartet. He keeps saying, is you down? I don't know how comfortable I am with him using sort of non-grammatical speech, because it seems so affected when he's so clearly ridiculously educated and has so much access to. But yeah, I don't know. It sounds cool. Final track is Us, parentheses, Tower of Love. More strings, just. This song, the strings on this song are so moving. Right up until they fall apart and leave you just desperately sad. But they're so moving. It is some of, nearing the end of the year, it's some of the most moving music I've heard this year. The way the strings are here. And you just keep saying, I'm you. I'm you. A weird sort of, codependent relationship ode. Why did my voice get so low? With club sauce. So that's my review. Weirdly enough, weirdly enough, I told my Patreons that I'd give them a shout out because like I know a bunch of my Patreons like this album, but I guess they didn't see it yet. But anyways, these are my Patreons. They give me money to buy music. I think I might buy this. I really enjoy this album. I see why you want me to talk about this person's art because it's really, really great. Hey, look, I got a new Patreon down there, Laura. So that's cool. So you can be a new person handwritten down there if you want. It's pretty sweet. Helps me to buy music, and also helps me to have a family. All right. Until next time. There's the camera.